also something called the Human Ecology Fund, African Medical Research Foundation and Human Ecology Fund, and James Monroe. And he said, oh, yes, I like your credentials, and so we're going to give you a grant. And then there were two psychologists, now they're all white, there were two psychologists, and they said, oh, but we don't have a letter of recommendation. So he said, well, you have to get a letter of recommendation. So I called Otto Kleinberg, and the next day, or 2 days later, Monroe called me and said, come on in. And these psychologists, they were so impressed because Otto Kleinberg had handwritten a recommendation for me. Mm. So I got a grant, a 1-year grant that took me to Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria. And this was to study, this was like, what was it called? Ethnic stereotypes. No, it's called emerging African images. Emerging African images. And so I went to Liberia, and things were so expensive, and Jody was, what, how old were you? 6. About 6 years old. And Adrian, and they only had this, we went to this hotel, St. George's Hotel, always remember. We checked in there, and there were bugs running around. And so I didn't know anybody in Liberia. But the head of the YMCA was a black American. So I went and saw him, and he took me to St. George's Hotel. And he said, what are you charging these people? And he said, oh, blah, blah, blah. He said, you know that's too much. He said, oh, I didn't know they were friends of yours. So we reduced the price. Now going from the airport, to go back up, going from the airport, we got in this old rickety cab, and he's speeding along, and people walking on the road, and I couldn't figure out why there were all these people, ladies with babies on their backs, buckets on their head, all these people. This was early in the morning. Where are they going? I don't know, coming and going. And they're just walking on the road and ignoring the guy. He's flying down there, and at the last moment they jump over into the curb, get off the street. But so when we got to the hotel, I told him, I said, look, no, I didn't know anything about how much it should be, but it sounded like a lot too much. So I said, no, that's too much. He said, okay. And that was my first contact with what they call bargaining. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I stayed in Liberia for a month, traveled around there, testing actually doing some testing. And then I went to Ghana. And Ghana was fantastic. Now this is in 1960, and Ghana had become independent in 1957, 3 years. And this had become the Mecca for black Americans. The writers, and W. Du Bois was there, and his wife. And so it was like a Mecca. And there was this big statue of Kwame Nkrumah. And I knew a professor, Sinclair Drake, who taught at the University of Chicago. And so he introduced me around. I met Nkrumah. He introduced me around, and that was fantastic. Just with Nkrumah, I mean, you know, here's this big statue, and then there's the man, you know. But then going out on the road and going into these villages, no maps. But when I got to Ghana, they just had a census, 8 million people, and I had access to the census. And so I divided the country into so many segments, and then picked at random names or names of a village, and within that village, and then I would get out on the road, and Jody was there in this little old Volkswagen, and Adrian, and we'd go in. I interview these people, and that was fantastic. Went out early in the morning on the road. You know, just,
Now, with this grant, that gave you a salary also
I,
within the grant?
I had a grant. I think it was about $20,000 for a year,
Mhm.
and that was it. I mean, that was my upkeep, my
Turn this off, sorry.
no, that was my upkeep. That was my transportation, my housing, my living, everything. Okay, um, so so the travel, you know, gasoline, rent, blah blah blah, all of that had to come out of this grant. So then I was in Ghana, and that's when Jody and Adrian left and went to Rome. And then I went to Nigeria, and there when I got there at the university, it's in Ibadan, Lagos, the capital, in Ibadan, and they immediately gave me an office, and said there was some house, some cottages I could stay in, but they had to fix it up. So the first 2 weeks, I stayed in a dormitory with the students.
In Ghana?
No, they're in Nigeria now.
Nigeria.
No, I left Ghana. Now I'm in Nigeria, and that is a hell of a place where you hang out. And that's where I met Wally Soyinka and General Chebby. We'd hang out there, and so then I got the team. I recruited teams from around the country, so they then did the research. I mean,
Okay, and all this is within the grant?
yeah, I mean, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I mean,
all right.
I did,
So-
yeah.
So you had the grant, because I've got to move to the next. You had the grant for 1 year.
Right.
Okay. Then when that was over, then what did you
You know,
do?
we came back and worked with the Human Ecology Fund, the American African Medical Research Foundation, flying doctors, that whole thing, and worked there for 2 years, and then I worked on a journal, developing a journal for the Africa, for the Human Ecology, not for the Human Ecology Fund, whatever. And I traveled to a number of countries in Africa to get people lined up for this journal. And my idea, I was going to have a journal, and they were building this dam, this Aswan Dam. And I was going to interview people who were building the dam. I was going to interview people who were being displaced. And that's what lined up these people. And then headquarters, the American Society for African Development. They decided that they wanted to get heads of state to write up in the first journal. So that's when I quit and went to Peace Corps. And so then with Peace Corps,
Okay, now how did you end up going to Peace Corps?
well, I knew about Peace Corps. I was in Peace Corps. I was in Nigeria when Peace Corps was formed. I thought it was a great idea, and I was interested in it. And I went about a year early. I went, and they said, "Okay, well, we'll make you the deputy director for research." This is in Peace Corps. And I said, "Well, who is the director?" "Well, we don't have a director yet." I said, "Well, why don't you make me the director?" No. So that was the end of Peace Corps. So about a year later, I went back, and that's when they accepted me, and I was the deputy director for the Africa region. And then that led to other things, and eventually traveling.
Now, was Kennedy president then, or was Johnson?
No, Kennedy had been assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
No, they had got to Peace Corps, what, 65 or something, 65 or 66.
Who?
I mean, you did.
Yeah, 60.
Yeah.
Uh,
So this was the end of the Johnson years.
All right.
yeah,
Right.
Right before Nixon.
but so one of the jobs as a deputy director for the Africa region, I traveled for closeout conferences for volunteers when they're leaving. They'd have a closeout conference, and so we traveled to Botswana. Then it was called Botswana Land. Met the president and these people and traveled around Botswana and Botswana Land. And I remember we were at Cambia, and we were there, and there's nothing to do, and we learned to play darts. And then one day the pilot from this small plane came in and said, look, we have to go up to the Obuvanga swamp and pick up 2 people. Now, that's here over here. So if we go there and come back here, it would be easier. Why don't you just let us come with us now? So we flew up there to the Oklahoma swamp, and coming back, the pilot would say, "Oh, I see some animals over there." You go in, you fly and see those animals. "Oh, I see some over there," and so that was that. And then later at Peace Corps, I did evaluation, and then I became the